There's not enough coffee, not enough sleep. It's just not enough.
Never.
Alright, so you did anatomy of the lymphatic system, like with we can just go from the start. Yeah, it's a good idea.
I
Alright.
feel like this semester, like, I'm so lost. I don't know anything that's going on. Like, super lost.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Like, more lost than A&P I.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of,
Like, if you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you I don't know. I really don't know. So,
I'm sure you know more than you think you know. I'm pretty sure you do.
So, that's
All
why
right.
I'm definitely coming Wednesday.
Yes. Yeah, Wednesday's gonna be good.
Yeah.
Alright, so what's the function of the lymphatic system? So it's to drain excess liquid out of our bodies. And green is lymphatic. So heads up if you see green in the digestive, like if you see a little undigested model,
Okay.
and you see, he mentioned this in the review today, if you see like green vessels or a green like lump of tissue,
Mm-hmm.
green means lymphatic.
Okay.
So if he asks you what that is, and there's a choice about like not every choice, but the lymphatic choices.
Mm-hmm. That is the third.
Yep.
Okay.
So the lymphatic system. So the lymphatic system is it has kind of two purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So one is to drain fluid, and then, do you know the other purpose?
Mm-hmm.
It's immunity. So this is so basically the white blood cells live in the lymphatic system. So they live everywhere in our body, but this is kind of like their home. So the lymphatic system is it's like the police stations and like fire stations and stuff
Mm-hmm.
of our body. And then everywhere else is like the districts and the cities.
Okay.
Yep. So there's two types of immunity. So there's some, like, we can fight off a cold without, like, by ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we also get, what else do we get to prevent us from getting sick? Like a medical thing that comes out every year.
Flu shot.
Flu shots. Yeah.
This is a trick question.
Yeah, I know. So there's two types of immunity. So the first one is the one that we were born with, right? And that's called innate immunity. Innate, two N's. Oh my gosh. Yes. Innate immunity. I may have spelled that wrong, but that's fine. I didn't. And it's non-specific, meaning that it's not, meaning that your innate immunity is just protecting against anything and everything. And then you have acquired immunity. Again, with the spelling. Is that even right?
I think it's ACQ.
And it's adaptive immunity anyways, so I told you I left my brain at home. I mean, adaptive, acquired, those are kind of interchangeable terms when you're talking about this kind of immunity because it's adapting to your environment or acquired immunity.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where like you get the flu shot and because the flu shot basically just shows your body, it says, hey, here's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then your body says, oh my gosh, that's a thing, let's learn specifically how to fight off this one pathogen. And so then it stores and it makes little memory cells,
Mm-hmm.
and those little memory cells live for a really long time, and they're like the wise old grandpas. And then when you if you encounter the same flu, maybe next year the same flu
Mm-hmm.
comes around,
Yeah.
then those wise old grandpas pop up and they're like, I know that. And they teach everyone else how to fight it off. Yep. So it's adaptive, so you have to be exposed to it first.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, what what kinds of things in your body just kind of protect against everything, protect you from pathogens, from things in the world? Your first lines of defenses.
Your skin.
Your skin, yeah. Yeah, your skin. And what does your nose produce? Mucus. Mucus is a big first line of defense player because it catches all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Can you think of anything else? We've got generally just some general chemicals that are floating around. And then we have body fluids. Hooray. Because body fluids are, they have weird pHs, like they're acidic or basic,
Right.
and that helps fight off bacteria and pathogens and stuff. Also, lovely defecation and vomiting. That's like if you get something that you really don't want, you just gotta purge.
Right.
And then we've got an enzyme. It's called lysozyme. And do you remember the lysosomes from Anatomy 1? Yeah.
Kind of so.
Yeah, so these are the little, this is what's in the lysosomes. It's lysozyme.
Okay. The enzyme in there?
Yes.
Okay.
Lysozyme. Yeah, and these little vesicles just kind of eat everything, eat anything that it's exposed to, which is why they're in a vesicle inside your cell, because it'll just eat the cell, and it won't care. And then generally just acidity, so different pHs and acidities. Bacteria generally need very specific environments to live. And then the adaptive immunity is probably what you guys will talk about tonight, so I don't want to get in depth with that. But, so that's kind of your basic immunity.
Okay.
And then the actual anatomy of the lymphatic system. What is lymph? It's the fluid that your body produces. But where does the fluid come from?
Digestive.
Not the digestive system, but that would make sense. It comes from blood vessels. So the thing with blood vessels is that, and we didn't do the vessels chapter yet. So this is in the vessels chapter, but I'll explain it because it makes everything make more sense. So this is a capillary, right? An actual anatomically sized capillary. And it's the same capillary, this is just where the tissues have absorbed all the oxygen and given up all the CO2. This is just oxygenated blood, deoxygenated blood.
Okay.
So your arteries are super high pressure. Super high pressure. They have muscles in the arteries because it needs to be flexible, but your arterial side has a lot more pressure than the venous side. So what actually happens is because there's a ton of pressure pushing the blood this way, but there's just not a lot of pressure here, something has to give. So of course your capillaries have holes in them, right? And that's how they work. So what actually happens is the blood flowing through, actually some of it flows through, but then some of it gets pushed out by the pressure. So some of that liquid, the blood cells stay in there. The big cells, because they're too big to fit through these holes, and the proteins and stuff, that stays in there. But some of this liquid, some of the plasma, leaks out into your tissues. So if you've ever seen like pictures or seen someone with edema in their legs, like super swollen legs,
Yeah.
it's because their lymphatic system doesn't catch all of this extra liquid, and they're just like leaking into their tissues. So a lot of this just goes right back into here. So you actually leak about 20 liters of fluid throughout the day. Like 20 liters leaks out of your capillaries,
That's a lot.
which is insane, yeah.
It's like 10 soda bottles.
Yeah, honestly. So most of this goes back in, but then about 3 liters of it just stays in the tissues. So you have a lymphatic vessel, and it sits right next to the capillary, and it's got these little flaps. And these little flaps are attached to like a tissue cell or something. They're attached to the tissue in some way by a little anchor. So as fluid leaks out of the capillaries, right? As fluid leaks out, it builds up in this space, in this interstitial space. It pushes everything farther apart because you're adding fluid to it, right? Does that make sense? So as this little bit of tissue gets pushed farther apart from this lymphatic vessel, it opens up this little flap. So this little flap opens because this little guy's being pulled away from it and pulls the flap up, and all this extra fluid goes into the lymphatic vessel. And then once you drain enough liquid where this little bit of tissue gets close enough to the lymphatic vessel that you don't need to drain any more liquid, it closes again, and it's still anchored, but now you don't drain any more fluid, because you want to keep some fluid in the cells, in between the cells. But that's how your lymphatic system catches everything. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, so that's the simplified version. That's really what you need. And then he was mentioning this in the digestive system. So normally everywhere else, this is called a lymphatic capillary right here, because it's the equivalent of the blood capillary. But in the digestive system, this is called a lacteal. So, and actually, it's in the little oh my gosh, why can't I think of it? Fingers. Oh my gosh, cilia, microvilli. Yes, I wanted to say microfimbriae, and I was like, that's not a thing. It's like, that's not a thing. So you've got in here you've got arteries and veins, and this is in your digestive system, right? So you're absorbing all this stuff, and got a bunch of capillaries, but then your body packages fats in the digestive system in packages that are too big to fit in the tiny holes of the capillary, but they can fit in the big openings of the lymphatic vessel. So you have this little lymphatic capillary, and it's called a lacteal. So that's a note that you'll probably want to make and remain and keep in the back of your mind. That in the digestive system is called a lacteal, because it can't have the same name.
The lymphatic capillary is a lacteal in the digestive system.
In the digestive system, exactly. Yep. And it catches these big packages of fats that are just too big to fit in here. So, because these flaps are quite large. They can actually they catch microbes and bacteria and stuff. And that's actually part of how why your immune system is so closely tied in with your lymphatic system is because as the fluid that's now called lymph, because once it enters in here it's called lymph, because it can't be the same thing. Once it enters in here, it goes to little like stop stations throughout your body that checks it, and you have a bunch of white blood cells in those like police stations that like inspects it and monitors it and looks for any rogue cells or bacteria and stuff.
Almost like the guys that repair the NASCAR.
Yeah, it just kind of they just kind of like
Make a pit stop.
Yeah, they make a pit stop. It kind of looks real quick and then it sends it on.
So what is it that the lacteal packages again?
The lacteal
Or
doesn't
catches?
package anything. It catches fats.
Catches fat. That's what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all the other nutrients go into your capillaries, your blood capillaries, and then the fats go into your lacteals.
Okay.
Yep. So what? All right. So the stopping stations in the lymphatic system have a name, like the pit stop stations. Do you know what they are? You can feel them right here. You can feel some of them.
Is it a bump?
It is a bump. Yeah. Yeah, and they're called lymph nodes.
Oh, lymph.
Yeah.
Should have known when you went with See, I'm not here today.
That's okay. Yeah, so you go from a lymph capillary. That's not how you spell capillary, but that's fine. You can add an extra letter.
There we go.
Why do extra letters hurt? No one cares. So it goes from a blood capillary to the interstitial fluid to the lymphatic capillary, which is where we are now, and then it goes to a lymph vessel, kind of like a blood vessel, right? Goes to a lymph vessel, and then it goes through a lymph node. So the lymph node is it's like what we were talking about. It gets inspected and it gets filtered. So it's this little guy, whereas here it is. It looks like a bunch of it looks like mesh on the inside.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah, it looks like mesh, and everything gets filtered through there, and everything slows down. All this fluid slows down, and so it gives your white blood cells that are stationed in there time to look at everything. And it gives them time to like pick out the bad stuff. So it goes through a lymph node, and then it goes to a lymphatic trunk. And the lymph trunks are kind of the lymphatic equivalent of like the aorta and the vena cava, like the big vessels.
Okay.
But instead of calling them like an artery or a vein, it's a trunk. Yeah. And then it goes to a lymph duct. And the duct is where it dumps all the lymph back into your venous system. So it dumps all the lymph right up here into this, like in between your jugular and your subclavian veins, because there's really low pressure there, and that's why.
Gotcha.
Yep. So that's how you get all this extra fluid out of your legs and back into your veins. So it's pretty cool.
It's a whole process.
Yeah, I mean that's a simplified. Yeah, it's basically that's how you get all the fluid. It's really not too bad.
Yeah. Just follow the steps.
Yeah.
So this we should study for the final for sure?
Not for the practical.
Okay.
This is lecture. Did you want to do practical stuff?
No, I was just asking so I know, like, so I have an idea of
Okay.
what to study for the practical, because, I mean, there's, like, last semester there was questions on there that it wasn't
I mean,
actual, like, model of anything, it was just
This
questions.
does pertain to it, and none of this will be like none of this will take away from your knowledge of the practical.
Okay.
So basically, at this point, whatever you study in the practical applies to lab, and what you study in lab applies to lecture, and most of what you study in lecture applies to lab. So you need both.
Both, yeah.
You need both to understand everything, and definitely like the lacteal is, more lab side, but all of this, like, he could ask, what is this, right? You'd have to say lacteal, and then you might say, what system is it part of? And you have to pick the lymphatic system. You might say, what's the fluid inside of it? And you have to say lymph.
Okay.
That type of thing.
Okay.
And then, so there's other lymphatic tissues, right? So it's not just this, there's other like immunity things in your body, lymphatic tissues. So there's primary and secondary lymphatic tissue. And this also, will pertain to lab because it's anatomy.
Yeah.
But like specifically anatomy as opposed to physiology. So, alright, so there's two things. So there's primary lymphatic tissue, and then there's secondary lymphatic tissue. So the primary, the difference is where are the white blood cells made and where do they live? So where are white blood cells made?
Hold on, you just said this. In the lymphatic system.
But where in the body? Where are blood cells made? Like all of them. Not your liver. They're broken down in your liver. Your red blood cells are.
I know this, but it's just not coming to my brain right now.
They live it's made in your bones. Where are your bones?
Your
Bone marrow, your red bone marrow. Oh my gosh, I keep inhaling chalk. It's really bad. I'm sure I'm gonna get maybe that's why I felt like my lungs deteriorating.
Probably have scarring or
Yeah, honestly. My little dust cells in my lungs are like, please help. So your white blood cells are made in your red bone marrow. But not all of them. So your red bone marrow is kind of like, I like to think of it as like your little hometown and your little hometown high school. So most every maybe your little college, your little community college, right, is all in this little town of red bone marrow. And most everybody is born and raised and grows up and goes to college and matures in this town, right? But not everyone. Some people go to grad school. Yes. So all of your cells, most of them mature here in your red bone marrow, your white blood cells. Your B cells, specifically, as part of your, you'll figure out later. They'll talk about that later. Your B cells mature in the red bone marrow. But there's the overachievers of the world who decide to go to grad school. And grad school is more commonly known as the thymus.
Thymus University.
Exactly, Thymus University. I'm going to write that down. I was trying to think of an abbreviation, but it didn't come to me. Thymus University. So that is the grad school where they learn to be super specialized. Yes. So, so where's your thymus? Do you know where it is?
Thyroid. Or
it's actually right below your thyroid.
Yeah.
It's like you have to remove the thymus to see the heart. So it's kind of like right. It's
okay, so it's
interior of the heart. So when you dissect the cat, he had to remove the thymus first in order to see the vessels and stuff.
Okay.
Yep. So your thymus is a university specifically for T cells. And so they grow up mostly in the red bone marrow, and then before they're allowed to practice and pretend to be doctors, they have to go to the thymus, which is great. It's literally because it's so that they don't kill you. And so that they learn how to do their job. Because you wouldn't want a doctor, you wouldn't want a person who graduated from their local university with a pre-med degree to be a doctor, right? It's the exact same thing. You don't want an immature, the thymus needs a controlled space to mature. or the T cells. The T cells. So once they've grown up in the red bone marrow, they move to the thymus, and the thymus now like selects them and it tests them literally to see, are you going to kill me?
Boars.
Are you going to kill? Yeah, they're boars literally. Like it tests whether or not they can kill anything, whether they're capable of being doctors, right?
Yeah.
I guess killing and doctors is not the right analogy, but whatever.
Yeah, it's okay.
Whether they can defend.
We understand.
Yeah, and then you test whether or not they like will kill the body.
Kill the patient.
Yeah, kill the patient. So you weed those guys out, and then the ones that are not going to kill, that will kill something but won't kill the body, you outfit them and you teach them how to kill the right thing. So it's grad school.
Gotcha.
Yep. Most everything, because these are your super specialized. These are part of your adaptive immunity.
Okay.
So most everything else is part of your innate immunity.
Which you were born with.
Yeah, exactly. You're like natural killer cells, things that just attack anything and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the T cells are part of the adaptive immunity, and they need to be trained. So that's all for primary. And then secondary is where all of these nice young people, nice younglings grow up and live, and where they work. So they've graduated either with their bachelor's degree or their grad school degree. Some of them, like the red blood cells, just skipped college, they went to high school, and they just matured in the blood. So they go and live in the little stations. So where do you think they live? Where do you think was one of the places they live? The stations that we were talking about, that all this stuff goes through. They do, well, they live in the digestive system. They do. They live specifically in the lymph nodes. Yeah. So the ones that graduated with a criminal justice degree go and live in the lymph nodes, and they go be police there. Some of them go and live in the spleen, and they do their like criminal investigation work in the spleen. And then some of them live in what's called lymphatic follicles. So a lymph node has a little capsule around it, and it's kind of like you know how the kidney has a capsule around it. It's similar.
Okay.
A lymphatic follicle is literally a node without a capsule. That's it. I did spell that right. Except this looks like an E. There we go. It's just a node without a capsule. So you have little patches of stuff. So I don't know if you remember in the digestive system when there's little patches of lymphatic tissue in the digestive system that screen things that are coming in through these lacteals. They're called Peyer's patches. And they're in your digestive system because you're absorbing so much stuff. It's like border crossing police. Okay. And so that's part of what your lymphatic, that's part of where you find your lymphatic follicles. Let's see. That's lymph nodes. There's also an abbreviation that you'll probably want to remember. It's abbreviated MALT. MALT, and it means mucus-associated lymphatic tissue. So literally lymphatic tissue that's in mucus membranes. Yeah. It's super, super intense and detailed. Am I spelling mucus right? Oh, it's mucosa. Very specific. I've just accepted that I don't really spell very well. And you know what? People still love me. So you find these MALT tissues. One of the places you find them is surrounding the entrance to your throat, from your oropharynx.
Okay.
so that, because it screens everything that comes in. So as like the food or the air that you breathe like rubs up against this mucosa associated lymphatic tissue, it looks at it kind of like an aerial police view.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. One of the reasons I like the lymphatic system is because I can come up with so many analogies.
Yeah.
And it just makes me laugh. Alright, let's see. It's kind of the generals of that, and there's other things that, you know, you can get more in depth with, but it's nice to have the basics be simple. Alright, let's see. So did you get into like inflammation and like interferons, complement systems?
I don't remember complement systems.
Okay. Did you get to this slide?
Let's see.
Do you remember?
Doesn't look familiar.
Okay. Then we won't go over any of that. Let's see. Yeah, I'll let you go over that, and then
Yeah, I'm not sure.
yeah, and then
Okay.
one day if we have anything.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
That's fine.
Yeah. Is there anything confusing still?
Just this a little bit.
This
Yeah.
right here?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Like the part where like it opens the capillary and then it closes it.
Mm-hmm.
Lost me there a little bit.
Okay. So all this is enclosed, right? It's in an enclosed space.
Okay.
So it's like imagine you put a bunch of those, like, you know, those disgusting little like jelly ball things you put on candy on ice cream?
Boba?
Is that what it is? I hate them. Alright. So yes. So okay, so imagine yes, so imagine you put a bunch of boba in a water balloon,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And then you started so all that boba is super close together
Right.
in this water balloon. And then you start filling it with water. And as the water balloon expands, the boba starts to move apart from each other a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That's the same thing that's happening here. Imagine the little tissue cells are boba inside a water balloon. So
Okay.
the more liquid you put in there, it has nowhere to go
And
because there's nothing, because it doesn't, once it gets into here, it doesn't just flow, it doesn't flow downhill or anything, it just stays there. So if you didn't have the lymphatic system, all of these like cells, you know, you can imagine them as boba, they would all just like go apart, they'd fill, like fluid would get around them and they'd push apart and it would be gross and weird. So now imagine the little bobas have tiny strings attached to like if you put a straw in the middle of it, and then you had little flaps, and as the boba moved apart, they opened up these little flaps because they were attached to it, and then now all the liquid goes into the straw. Does that make a little bit of sense, or is that confusing?
Still a little confused.
Still confusing.
Because I understand this was on this side, the top drawing. Oxygenated blood?
Oxygenated, yeah.
Deoxygenated.
Yes, so this is the same vessel.
Right.
Yeah. So it's all the same vessel, it's just different types of blood that's in there. And then there's a bunch of cells in here. So this is filled with cells, right? This is your actual tissue. So this is where all of your oxygen is going to feed these cells. And then all these cells are giving out their carbon dioxide. And then all this extra fluid that gets pushed in between these cells, you don't want all that extra fluid
Okay.
in between those cells. So it drains into the lymphatic system. It just kind of like as this flap opens, it kind of works its way down. If this flap was closed or if this didn't exist, it would all just like build up in here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like the water balloon filled with boba that you just can't drain. So you get this water balloon and it's huge,
Mhm.
and there's just like little tiny bits of boba floating around in it.
Okay.
Does that make
Yeah.
more sense?
Yeah.
The boba balloon was like an excellent analogy in my brain, and then the more it went on and on, it just like deteriorated. And I was like, please stop.
Oh man.
But hopefully someone will enjoy it.
Right. Hopefully they like boba too.
Yeah, I hate it. I think it's so nasty.
It's like it's literally an explosion of flavor.
That's why I think it's gross. Is because it's an
Extra good.
explosion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the mango ones or the passion fruit one.
Really? I don't know. I've tried them and I just can't get over the fact that it's slimy and then it just explodes, and it's kind of gross to me. So.
I normally just put it in my frozen yogurt. Like I'll just put like a
That's how I've
spoonful.
done it. That's how I've had it, and I
You
just
don't like
don't like it. But for some reason, I always want to try boba tea. But I didn't realize that was what boba was, and I don't
But
like tea.
In boba tea, it's different because it's not liquid inside. It's just tapioca,
Oh,
so
really?
it's more firm. It's firm.
Okay,
It's
see,
not
I like
actual
that.
like an explosion of
Okay,
flavor in your
I
mouth.
would like that because now I'm imagining like ice cream boba in tea, and I don't like tea, and I don't like ice cream boba. So
Well, like the tea is not like green tea.
it's like fizzy, isn't it?
No, it's not fizzy.
not
It's,
fizzy?
it's well, I like the milk tea,
Mm-hmm.
and I always get almond milk because I can't do dairy, but it's so good. It doesn't taste like tea that you like with the bag. It doesn't taste like
Okay.
that. It's different.
Well,
They
then
have
I'll
different
try
like
it.
coffee jellies and
Oh, I
on the
love coffee.
bottom. Yeah, if you ever get the chance to go to the Florida Mall, go to Boboology, and it's not the food court, it's the dining pavilion. It's where Carlos Bakery is.
Okay.
It's a stand.
Okay.
But they have like so many varieties.